everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, and the questers that are Josh and Dan. I am Dan.
I am Josh.
The lore master himself. On today's podcast, we'll be discussing all things still confidential. However, if you have an email for us or questions about anything we're going to talk about, have talked about, will talk about, or would like us to talk about, please feel free to contact us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed the live podcast we just did on Sunday.
Yes.
Because we're recording this before that happens, and we're thinking you had a good time, because we think we had a good time, so it's kind of a meta verse thing, and time travel is
time shifting and recording is weird,
and editing is awesome.
This episode comes out after FreedoniaCon, the live episode which we will have had been recording. Time travel joke. We will be recording that as we are speaking here.
Yes.
In a few days.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are listening to us talk about it, it will have had been recorded a couple of days ago, at least if you're listening to this when it first drops. And the audio from that live recording will be dropping into the feed as the next episode, next week. Yeah. And so you can hear all the wonderful questions that did get sent in and the maybe wonderful answers that we gave to them.
Mostly Josh, not me. But if you didn't get your question asked, send it to us anyway. We'll do it eventually. We'll get there. So far, I don't think we've actually edited out any single question that's been asked. We've answered every single thing that's come in.
I won't say I'm an open book, but I can expound upon topics like mad.
Which is when I give Josh the hand signal to land that plane. And then we're good. And we move on to the next topic. And we're all taken care of. So anyway, folks, tonight we're going to talk about another one of our secret societies of Barsave from the first edition book put out by FASA. And this one's fun. When I told Josh what we're talking about, he's like, oh, this is great. He had a big smile on his face. So we'll just get in and get to the nasty right off the bat. We're going to talk about the Fellowship of Night.
Yeah. This is a secret order of Nethermancers.
Yeah. So the first question I have would be, would your Nethermancer be like vying for membership in this? Before we even talk about what it is or how long they've been around or what they're doing. Would she?
Virag probably is aware of them at this point as of our most recent downtime session. Virag is now fully 8th circle.
Woo!
With a whole bunch of knacks and spells and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yay.
And so with the general amount of nethermantic lore that goes along with half magic as a result of being at the top of the journeyman tier, she might be aware of them as a thing, but they have not cropped up in our game, and I don't think that there's any particular reason for her to go hunting them down just yet.
Fair.
If at all. Her interests are more in astral entities and, for lack of a better term, astral zoology.
Oh, yeah.
Not
fair.
the horrors, but spirits and other denizens native to the astral plane and some of the nicer, safer nether realms. So if anything, I'm going to talk about Virag for a little bit because
do it.
It's our show and I can talk about what I want.
Yes. Sorry, any other listener.
I know a lot of our listeners also, those who are into actual play stuff, also listen to the Legends game. Even though it hasn't
dropped in a while.
But like new episodes come out once in a while.
Yeah.
We have recorded a whole bunch of episodes, but they are just slow to come out. Anyway,
yes,
we had talked about Virag possibly picking up a path, possibly looking at a second discipline. And given her temperament and experience and what she is sort of interested in, the only second discipline that I could potentially see her being interested in would be shaman, because of the very strong spirit connection there.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of any paths that seem particularly suited to her.
So nothing's calling to her just yet.
No.
Fair. Well, this isn't necessarily a path. This is a nice little community to maybe join into.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, as we will explore while we are discussing them, the stuff that they are interested in is not stuff that is necessarily aligned particularly strongly with what Virag is interested in.
No, fair enough. So I loved the essay in the Secret Societies of Barsave about the Fellowship of Night, because it was a nice little chronological view, and I don't think there's any better way to tell this tale. So let's just start at the beginning. They are a Nethermantic order, a cloistered community living in the Delaris Mountains. Exact specific site not revealed, which is just fine. They are built around an ancient Liferock. And so the Delaris Mountains, for those who aren't looking at a map because maybe you're driving or running on a bus, it's between the Liaz jungle and Carafad, so it's on the far western side of the map. And
it's south of the wastes. If you picture Barsave, you've got the wastes and the poison forest and the Liaz jungle kind of that are on the western border of Barsave. If you head south, you kind of go through the lands of the former troll kingdom of Ustrecht, and you've got the Twilight Peaks, and then there's more mountains kind of further to the west that are south of the wastes. Those are the Delaris Mountains, and kind of also mark the border, part of the northern border of Carafad.
Yeah. So that's where the Delaris Mountains are.
Yeah, the Delaris Mountains have a couple of trollmoots in them that are also described in Crystal Raiders of Barsave. Mm-hmm. And I think, in fact, there is also a little bit of a mention about the Fellowship of Night in that book as well.
Very cool.
Possibly.
But that's another show.
While you're talking, I will pull up that book and take a look.
Yes. So that's where to find this Liferock. Somewhere in there, Game Masters, put it wherever the heck you want. Make it interesting to find, however. Because this Liferock was viable, was having obsidian occasionally emerge from it once upon a time, but it was right before the Scourge actually happened. Of course, there were horrors infesting the area before the actual barrier broke down significantly enough. There were little bits of corruption happening here and there, and the occasional invasion happening by a single horror here or there, or constructs here or there as well. Right before the Scourge, this Liferock was infiltrated by a horror. It's supposed that it was a despair thought, and that horror corrupted the Liferock, trapping the obsidian inside, sending out a false signal for all the other obsidian birthed from this Liferock to come home, and they all did. And so the horror sat there and fed off of all the now entrapped obsidian in this Liferock. So that happened. But then a Nethermancer, banished from the kingdom of Landis, Sovic Nightwalker, and his followers came upon this Liferock, and being, the Nethermancer he is, figured out that there was a spirit in there, the horror, trapping obsidian, doing bad things, and so he decided to battle it, and oddly enough, became victorious.
Yeah.
So then he and his followers built a citadel around the Liferock and tapped the elemental power of that Liferock for protection of the citadel and the Liferock itself. So they actually were able to survive the Scourge without the rites of protection and passage, because he tapped into the elemental power of that Liferock itself and decided to make that into a school, and they fended off the horrors for 400 years. Just their little lonesomes. What'd you find, Josh?
So the Fellowship of Night does get mentioned a couple of times in Crystal Raiders of Barsave, which was actually, I believe, the next book that was released after this, at least based on the product numbers. The Fellowship of Night is loosely allied with the Skyseeker moot, which is one of the troll moots in the Delaris Mountains. And there is a little bit of info about the relationship and a little bit of info that kind of expands on how the Fellowship might have been involved with the events leading up to what would have been Bar-Savit War.
So during the Scourge, Sovic and his followers founded this school that they named the Fellowship of Night, and this is where Thera, because the essay is written by, of course, Theran infiltrators, Thera is interested in the Liferock itself and or the school, because they would love to know how to tap into the Liferock and use its energies, because this is right after they landed the Triumph on the Ayodhya Liferock. So they really want to know this stuff.
Yeah. In addition, the Fellowship of Night are dedicated to the study of astral space and the nether realms and all kinds of iconic nethermantic stuff.
Yeah. So they're into all of it.
Yeah, and so in addition to the details and information that they have learned about how to tap into the power of the Liferock, there's also a whole bunch of other lore and information that they only have access to that any magician would be particularly keen on learning. Now, one of the things that I want to mention here with regards to this is that the Liferock, the Brotherhood of the Liferock that was tapped into by the Brotherhood, by the Fellowship of Night, is effectively gone. There weren't really any survivors of the Horror's attack on it.
No.
That Brotherhood is dead. And so, depending on your point of view, Obsidian still might not be particularly thrilled with the idea of what they're doing, but it might not be quite as sacrilegious as what's going on with Ayodhya, because Ayodhya, or what had been going on, because Ayodhya was a living Liferock and still had living Obsidian trapped in it, and members of that Brotherhood who were not in it, Omasu, for example. But another thing that gets mentioned in the Crystal Raiders book is that the other moot that's in the Delaris Mountains, the Rockhorn moot, is very kind of strongly aligned with Obsidian in general. And one of the hooks or stress points between the Rockhorn and the Skyseekers, is that if the Rockhorns find out about the Skyseekers' alliance or friendly relationship with the Fellowship of Night and what the Fellowship of Night has done, the Rockhorns would be pretty pissed off about it.
So this is like literally the lesser of two evils, because one, the Fellowship of Night is using the nethermantic energy of the Liferock, or the Therans want to use the real life energy of the Ayodhya Liferock. So, you know. I
mean, look, they're Nethermancers.
They play with the boundaries and rules a little bit.
They play with the boundaries of sometimes play with the boundaries of morality.
Yeah.
The Liferock is, in one sense, dead.
Yeah.
And so why let that resource go to waste in a way?
Well, because now it's a new resource for them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very practical, pragmatic, realistic approach to things. We came upon this thing, we defeated the horror that was tormenting the Obsidian that were part of this Liferock, but the Liferock is kind of irrevocably damaged and altered by what happened. And so we will become caretakers of it and learn all sorts of cool stuff by studying it and various other things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no real problem with that.
Well, again, it depends on who you talk to. Rockhorn moot,
to the
Purifiers.
Yep.
Brothers of Stone.
Oh,
we talked about a whole bunch of groups that probably would have some issue with what the Fellowship of Night is up to, even if this Liferock could not necessarily be redeemed, I don't think that the Brothers of Stone or the Purifiers would be particularly fond of what they are doing.
Well, and that's just before we get into the aspect of, they needed, reinforcements and or soldiers during the Scourge to help fight off the horrors. So what did the Nethermancers do? They reanimated all of the obsidian that had died at the horrors' hands and used them as soldiers. And they are now, they're called Black Guards. And so these obsidian actually are undead, A, and B, they are not only obsidian, but since there is no life connection there, they're wearing full-blown plate armor. And they're enhanced by nethermantic energy. So these are some big, bad mamma jammas. I'm going to stop there. Before you get to that point, maybe those groups had an issue with the Fellowship of Night, but I'm pretty sure that if these groups found out what they were doing with those obsidian and the Black Guard, they might have some other issues to raise. Josh?
Yeah.
Thoughts? Because if you actually have the Secret Societies of Barsave book, the stats for the Black Guards are in there. So
the stats for the Black Guards, they are, for high circle characters, I look at at least as presented in first edition, I look at the stats that are there for the Black Guards, and the Legends group could take them, but the Legends group are all like 8th circle or 7th and 8th circle characters in some cases with second disciplines or paths or other things.
I got a 6th circle scout and my party is 4 people. We could take these guys. Not 50 of them, but we could.
The issue is not that necessarily an individual Black Guard is a imposing enemy. The issue is if you get multiples of them, and also each of them is actually bonded to a member of the Fellowship.
Yep.
Which means that they are all journeymen or better Nethermancers.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that's kind of revealed as part of the game information on this group is that any members of the Fellowship that are encountered outside of their citadel are at least 5th circle and maybe as high as 8th or 9th. And the current Grandmaster is a 13th circle Nethermancer.
Yeah.
Who is a human and has used versatility to pick up talents from various other disciplines as well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the Fellowship has a group true pattern, which means that the members of that group probably also have
enhanced abilities.
Group threads woven to, they say generally, spellcasting, thread weaving, spell defense, and mystic armor. And so the magicians, the Nethermancers of the Fellowship of Night, are difficult opponents to take out mystically, and each of them is guarded by a physically imposing individual.
Yes.
And so you get a group of them together, and things are going to be perhaps a little hairy.
Yeah, because you've got at least a Nethermancer and a bodyguard, if not 2 bodyguards per member of the Fellowship. So the Fellowship pretty much has developed over time an almost symbiotic relationship with this Liferock that they've renamed Heartstone, and they use its power for their rights, for their magic abilities, their ritual magic, so forth and so on. And they have also taken pieces of the Liferock itself, actual chunks of the Liferock, polished them up and created what they call life shards. And this is also their spell matrix item and their group pattern item. And it works, oddly enough, kind of like a cell phone.
Yeah, a little bit.
They can hold it up. The other person's picture comes up and they can just talk to them. So I was like, oh, look, Earthdawn invented the cell phone.
It is a spell matrix item. It allows the owner to have a spell matrix or a spell sort of woven into the item to have available. It is their item for the group true pattern.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, these things kind of bend, if not in some ways break the rules on magic items, thread items, group pattern items, and whatnot. But then they also have the ability to communicate with any other holder of an active life shard anywhere. Unlimited long-distance communication.
Yeah.
It can't be used to determine the location of where other shards are. They can only be used to communicate.
Yeah, there's no GPS app on this thing.
And also,
yes,
at least as written up in the first edition book, these have not seen an update. For 4 strain, the life shard can draw on the power of Heartstone to add a step bonus to a single spellcasting or will force test equal to the rank of the thread woven to the shard once per day. So, in addition to all of the other bonuses and advantages that members of the Fellowship have when they are out and about in the world, they also have a overtuned desperate spell charm.
Yeah. Which, again, nothing to sneeze at.
Virag's got a desperate spell charm. It can come in handy.
Exactly. Yeah, they do come in very handy because the Fellowship Nethermancers outside the Citadel, and we'll tell you why they're outside the Citadel in a minute, but most of those running around outside the Citadel are at least 5th circle up to 8th or 9th. So they're nothing to sneeze at in the first place, but you had a point.
Also, the life shard can substitute for a bone circle when using spells that require a bone circle to cast, like Spirit Portal or Grave Message or something like that. Yeah. They can act as if they are standing in their own bone circle in order to cast those spells.
They just have it on them.
These things are pretty powerful artifacts that kind of bend a lot of rules, which I think is kind of cool, but also is the sort of thing that makes me as a designer and magic theorist go, don't ask me how it works. I'm just going to wave my hand and say,
it's magic.
Here's the thing.
Yes,
it's magic. But also,
magic has rules.
The Fellowship of Night is another organization that I think would be phenomenal to work up as a path.
Oh, totally.
Because what you could do to kind of bend some of the rules, rather than having, these artifacts that they harvest and refine and enchant from the Liferock.
Yeah.
That do like 4 or 5 different things at once.
So this is your enchanting rules.
Yeah. So like you could look at that and maybe try and create something as an enchanted artifact.
Yeah.
But what I would be more inclined to do, rather than making all of these items or all of these abilities inherent into the life shard itself, would be to take some of these abilities that they have, like the 4 strain for a boost, like the ability to do Grave Message, Spirit Portal, and similar type spells without actually needing to be inside a bone circle, and make those knacks that are available to members of the Brotherhood, or of the Fellowship. Because then what happens at that point is, let's kind of roll things back here and posit as an example, your group is coming into conflict with the Fellowship of Night.
Yeah.
And you defeat a member of this organization that is out in the wild, and you get a hold of their life shard. You now, in a sense, have a thread item that you could take advantage of. This is one of the dangers of magic items and powerful artifacts in general is how are you going to handle them coming into player character hands? And there may not be a problem with that if you're cool with that. Great, fantastic, whatever. But the secrets of that, if those are gated behind knacks or improved spells or whatever that are only available to members of the Fellowship, that just kind of provides a layer of mystery about what's going on. You have this organization, these strange Nethermancers that you run into that have these abilities that seem to break or bend the rules of magic as currently understood, and they are just part of the secrets that the Brotherhood has learned as a result of their centuries of study of this Liferock and the depths of astral space and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I can almost hear Morgan detouring off into a, now I need to go create this, sidebar over here for this.
Morgan doesn't listen to the show.
I'm teasing.
Morgan doesn't have time to listen to the show.
No, he does not. It's okay. We love you, Morgan. It's all right. But hey, anybody else want to give it a shot? Write it up for your own group. Go for it. Knock yourself out. I think it's perfectly viable to have this as since it was mentioned as a group pattern already. Yes, absolutely. Go make this into a path. It's already got a name. I mean, you're good. Why not? So let's talk about the reason you might see some of these Nethermancers of the Fellowship of Night out and about. They're looking for something. And
yeah,
this is a major item that they're looking for. Do you want to give them the history on the Chain of Skulls?
The Chain of Skulls first appeared actually in Arcane Mysteries of Barsave.
Yes.
There were a couple of example grimoires within that book, and the Chain of Skulls was one of them. I don't have that book right to hand, but I think it starts to provide a little bit of info where it came from and what it is and so forth.
While Josh talks, I'll go look that up.
Yeah. The Chain of Skulls is the result of a ritual that supposedly the founder of the Fellowship, Sovik Nightwalker, put together when a Grandmaster of the Order passes. A piece of their skull is cut out and inscribed with the most powerful spell or most significant piece of lore or whatever kind of thing that master created or discovered during their lifetime. And all of these bone discs are chained together or strung on a cord and hung on the Heartstone, the Liferock that the Fellowship is built around. Because each of the skull pieces is from a former Grandmaster of the Order, they can be used as focuses for summoning a Ghost Master or the Ghost Master that is represented by that skull. And so that lore and that information can be retained or accessed by people further on down the line. Apparently, somehow, the chain was stolen.
I have a sidebar for that one. Recently unknown miscreants stole it from the Fellowship of Night. A short time after the Nethermancers discovered that the chain was missing, they found an acolyte of the Fellowship dead in his room. They also sensed the presence of a powerful spirit in the chamber, and magical investigation revealed that the acolyte died of terror strong enough to stop his heart. They believe that the chain has been taken by a powerful spirit or horror, and the Nethermancers have been trying to recover it ever since.
Yeah. And so the Therans, upon learning of the existence of the Chain of Skulls, believe that it is very likely that there is information inscribed in this macabre grimoire that would allow them to tap into the secrets of Ayodhya, or to at least gain some insights into how, or any Liferock, but Ayodhya in particular,
that's the
because that's the one that they're sitting on top of.
Yep.
In the pre-war era. And so it is something of great interest to the Therans. They are after it. It is of something of great interest to the Fellowship of Night because they are also after it because they want it back. And so you've got a powerful magical artifact that is of great interest to two groups, one of which is very strongly antagonistic towards your typical player characters, and another group that is likely to be antagonistic against a group of player characters if the player characters are not of any bent to approve of what they have been doing with the Heartstone or to give them back the collected lore of their arcane grandmasters dating back centuries.
They're pretty ugly grimoire?
Right.
Whatever.
While we haven't done anything in particular with them when it comes to plans or updates or anything in 4th edition, they are still around.
Yeah, they're still a viable group to use.
They are absolutely viable as a group to use. They can kind of fit into a really nice gray area of not villains in the way that the Therans might traditionally be depicted, but they're not exactly
good guys.
Necessarily good guys either.
So they're kind of like the anti-hero. They do bad things in pursuit of the good thing.
Look, bad good. I mean,
subjective terms. Philosophy.
Nethermantic philosophy, or for certain schools of Nethermancers. But Sovik defeated the horror.
Yeah.
And there was this big corrupted Liferock.
Mm-hmm.
Again, why let such a useful resource go to waste? It's not like they're harming anybody else by continuing to do this in a strictly literal sense of the term.
Yeah.
Even if there are those who philosophically might be harmed by what they're doing to it. Brotherhood of Stone.
Yeah.
Purifiers,
etc.
I imagine that there might be Questors of Jasperi who might be interested in seeing to the healing of that in much the same way that the Purifiers kind of work with them.
Good and bad are relative terms to these people.
Yeah. As the Adept's Way Nethermancer essay puts it, you people with your concepts of good and evil, it's both simpler and more complex than you would put it.
Yeah. Well, it's not like the Fellowship is actually hurting anybody else.
Yeah, well, exactly.
They're not out trying to take over land. They're not actually out, actively recruiting people to a cause. They're, they kind of only...
We just want to study our magic and learn more about the universe, man. Yeah. Why you got to harsh on our vibe? Because we're using this energy source that isn't
being used by anybody else.
Yeah.
And they only farm new recruits from like little tiny communities outside their area, outside their citadel, that have popped up and understand they've got a relationship as well. But yeah, they're not like actively recruiting and trying to take over the Earth that we know of.
But the Fellowship can come up potentially in so many ways.
And places.
Especially if you are going to be dealing with a Chain of Skulls kind of thing. I'm sure that there are other groups that would be interested in it. I imagine the Denerastus would have quite a bit of interest in the Chain of Skulls and the potential lore that it might represent.
Yeah. And maybe even a dragon, because Charcoal Grin, the adventure hook listed in the book, has a tie to Charcoal Grin in Par Length, who might have one of her minions out looking for this as well. Or actually, I think the adventure hook says that they might actually be in possession of it. So, but yeah, many locations, many possibilities to work this one in.
The book also mentions that because of how important or powerful or significant this artifact could be, especially in terms of those who find it could perhaps extract favors from the Fellowship of Night.
Mm-hmm.
They are a significant magical power, if isolationists, but if the Kingdom of Thrall could recover the chain and use that to extract some favors from the Fellowship to do something. Looking at this within the context of the pre-war situation, the Therans would be very interested in making sure that it doesn't fall into the hands of Thrall or the Bloodwood or some other organization that could use that for leverage to bring the Fellowship on as an ally of sorts against the Therans.
A useful tool.
The other thing that could be involved here with regards to the Fellowship of Night relates back to the Skyseeker moot. One of the things about the Skyseekers is that they are supposedly cursed. It's a curse relating to the monastery where the books of Hera were found, were supposedly in the Delaris Mountains. And they are cursed until they can find the monastery again, but they haven't been able to. I forget the exact details on that. I didn't read up on that in particular detail, but that's part of the reason why they are allied with the Fellowship, because the Fellowship, not being part of the moot, might be able to get around the curse in terms of helping them break it.
Yeah.
So that is another way that the Fellowship could come into play if you're dealing with Crystal Raider politics or storylines or things like that.
Fair. I think this is...
Yeah, a lot of stuff that within secret societies is kind of being set up as possible hooks and ideas that could tie into Thrall's efforts to build an alliance against the Therans, providing these various groups with desires and motivations that could potentially be leveraged for development in the hypothetical Barsave at War book that at this point of development was certainly on the horizon, even if a lot of the details hadn't necessarily been fleshed out yet.
Yeah. I think that there doesn't necessarily need to be an update as far as the timeline for the Fellowship fight. They're isolationist. They keep to themselves. The Chain of Skulls is still missing. You don't need
could
to
still
really
be
change
missing.
that. You don't really need to update that unless all of a sudden, poof, the Chain of Skulls falls into somebody's hands, within the span that we advance the timeline. Other than that, I don't really think that anything needs to change. This is a perfectly still viable setup from 1st edition to 4th without a whole lot of change in timeline. Done. I think it's perfectly suited as it is for any game master to use. And I love the idea of the pattern items, the shards just being slightly breaking the rules. But, every once in a while, you got to have that MacGuffin that does that.
Yeah.
So, since we brought up Virag at the beginning of the show, before anybody knew what we were going to talk about, really, because this has not been discussed on a lot of podcasts, if any of them ever, before ours. So now that we've rehashed all of this, what do you think Virag would do if stumbled upon their citadel or in par length came across the Chain of Skulls? What would she do?
Assuming that the Chain of Skulls is in par length. If she came across the Chain of Skulls, that's one thing.
Oh, yeah, totally.
There's a lot of stuff that's going on with the Fellowship that does not particularly align with Virag's temperament or personal interests and goals.
Yeah.
But the Chain of Skulls would be absolutely fascinating to her in terms of what it contained. And who knows what would become of that? I don't think the Fellowship is something that she would seek out, but it would certainly be an interesting experience if their paths crossed.
Absolutely. So would she return the Chain of Skulls if one of the Ghost Masters asked her to, or would she just kind of hold on to that and I'll get my use out of it and maybe give it to you later?
I don't have the faintest idea.
Fair. No worries. Had to just toss it out there as a hypothetical. So
one other thing that I kind of want to mention,
by all means,
is that the current Grandmaster of the Order, Tana, her primary drive and goals are keeping the Fellowship secret. And while she is willing to work with various groups in order to recover the chain, the more people know about the Fellowship and the more people know about the Chain of Skulls, the more dangerous she believes it is for her order.
Yeah.
As of the information presented here, which is all pre-war, she doesn't really want to get involved in the war. And if she were to be reluctantly dragged into it, it would not be on the side of Thera, because she does not believe that the Empire would leave the Order alone, that they would be absorbed. The Empire strips resources from everywhere else. They would strip the resources that they found useful out of the Order and ultimately destroy it. They would not be left alone to do what they want to do. That is something that could be leveraged to get the assistance of the Fellowship, potentially, assuming that, as of the present day, Tana is still Grandmaster. That is swearing to keep it a secret in exchange for information or assistance of some sort, perhaps on the quiet.
That's all right. Nethermancers never do anything on the down low. I'm teasing. Of course they do. Yeah, I can't say we've bled this one dry. Nethermancer joke. But I think this is rife for the picking in subtle ways, overt ways. You've got Theran players, you got the Fellowship players as well. And like we said, any you can find one of the Fellowship in any geographical location, per se, because they're searching for this Chain of Skulls again. So, and it wanders. If somebody actually has it, somebody stole it. It's wandering around. Who knows? Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't quite cover for this one? Because I think this is a wrap.
This is a group that is kind of lurking in the background of the late first edition lore, and could serve an interesting purpose if your game intersects with the stuff that they are involved with in some capacity, whether you are running a game that is set prior to the war or even something afterwards. But unlike some of the more prominent organizations that we'll be talking about later in the series, you can ignore them without missing anything out of your game.
No.
With other organizations, it's tougher to ignore them because of the presence that they exert in a sense of narrative gravity in the setting.
Fair enough. So, folks, this is a wrap for this one. We will see you live in a few days on the FreedoniaCon podcast, but you'll hear that eventually after the fact, so kind of that whole time.
You'll hear that in a few days on the feed here as well.
Exactly. So until you hear that, visit that, see that, whatever the case may be, it is time for you to go take the lesser of two evils for your own legend.
Have a good night, everybody.